April, you're a literary consultant and an agent. Can you tell us what those two roles involve?
Yes, absolutely, Paul. An agent is essentially a broker between an author and a publisher. And so I, as an agent, we as agents, look for authors who have written work that we deem publishable and find interesting ourselves. And we normally work with an author to help edit and prepare her manuscript and then take it out to the market and try to match it up with a publisher. As a literary consultant, my role is a little bit different. Typically, when I'm working with a consulting client, I am not representing her or him, but rather working in an advisory role to help the author prepare a manuscript or a proposal in the case of nonfiction in order for that author to present it to another agent. And authors often find that helpful to work with someone who knows the behind the scenes routine to help them prepare their pitch and have it as ready, market ready as possible.
So those two roles, the literary consultant and the agent, it sounds like they would often, the consultant would often lead into the agency role. Does that happen, or is that something that you try to keep separate?
I try to keep those separate. Typically, as an agent will earn a commission on the sale. A consultant typically charges by the hour or by the job. I come out of a management consulting role. For many years, I worked in the corporate strategy world. And so I am very comfortable working as a consultant. And occasionally we'll take on a consulting client as a represented client, but not often. They're really two separate functions and two separate roles.
And with your agent hat on, what kind of authors do you represent?
I tend to specialize in women over the age of 50, all the way up to 100 and beyond, who are writing their first or only book, sometimes only book. Sometimes they go ahead and write a second, but I'm very much an advocate for women who have stories to tell. And for whatever reason, often because they have had a full career, they've been doctors or lawyers or business professionals, have not written that book and get to an age and stage where they very much want to write it. That is who I work with primarily. There are other categories outside of that, but that's my target audience.
That's the background of the authors. But what about genre? Is there a particular genre that you prefer to work with?
I work really across genres. I represent a lot of fiction, sometimes historical, but not exclusively, memoir, and often fictionalized memoir, which we'll talk about later, as well as nonfiction. I've been working with a number of nonfiction authors recently, very successfully, on what I would call women's issues. For example, one of the titles I'm most proud of is one called Do You Have Kids? Life When the Answer is No. And it's all about women who have not had children by chance or by choice, and what the implications are for their lives. So really across a variety of genres.
And when you take on an author as an agent, what do you start doing for them from day one? What's the process?
Well, first of all, we spend a bit of time typically on the phone. There are many authors I represent whom I've never met, believe it or not, because the world is so dispersed now. But we spend some time making sure that we can work together well. And that usually includes ensuring that they understand what the publishing world is all about. Number one, there are no guarantees. Number two, things that we think are worth getting published sometimes don't get published, at least traditionally. Number three, in the US anyway, if you're a celebrity, you will get things published regardless of how good they are. So I want to make sure that the authors understand what the world is that we're dealing with here. And then second, make sure that we understand the process, that I will spend some time editing the proposal or manuscript. I will ask her to make some changes, assuming she's agreeable. And then three, we go forth into the market, which takes a lot of patience typically, particularly if an author wants a traditional publisher, because it can take a very long while to find that. So I want to make sure we're aligned as people and we'll be good business partners into the future.
You mentioned that you start off by aligning your clients' expectations with the realities of the publishing industry. Is there often a significant gap there?
Yes, every author naturally thinks her book is going to be a bestseller, not to mention a film and an audiobook. And I, as kindly as possible, break the news that the world doesn't always work that way, and that it will require a lot of patience and some flexibility, in as much as if we cannot find a traditional publisher for her work within a reasonable amount of time, we will then talk about alternate means of publishing in order to make sure that her book does reach its readers.
So what are those alternate publishing routes that you might recommend?
Well, the biggest, the most exciting and I think promising route is what we call hybrid publishing, which is in essence a publisher who selects authors. They don't take everybody, and essentially the publisher and the author split the costs and split the profits. And it is a much more it's a much easier route in order to get things published, because with a traditional publisher, they are taking a big financial bet on the author, putting a lot of pressure on the author and themselves to sell that book. In a hybrid situation, the author and the publisher are truly partners. So I think hybrid publishing is wonderful. There's one in particular recently formed called Sibylline Press, which publishes the work of women 50 and over. So that press is very well aligned with the sorts of authors I'm working with. There's also independent or self-publishing. Many authors choose that route because they can make a much better profit from that. The problem with that is that an author really needs to learn the business. She needs to understand the business, and she needs to do all the steps that are involved in producing a real book.
That brings us to one of the sessions that you'll be leading at the festival. You'll be explaining how authors who go down the independent publishing route can get support for their book from a whole bunch of platforms and professionals out there. Mm-hmm. Could you give us an overview? What should our attendees expect from that session?
In that session, I do talk about the whole range of publishing options, from traditional to true self-publishing, and talk about the team that is required in order to really put together a robust publishing plan that ranges from editors to proofreaders to people who can help you lay out the book, both as a print book and as an ebook. If you want to produce an audiobook, you need to record it. And then very importantly, publicity. It really does take a team to publish a book. And in the case of traditional publishing, the publisher does it for you. If you are doing it independently or even on a hybrid basis, your publisher will do some things for you, but you as the author will be required to do a certain number of them as well. And so I walk through all the publishing options that exist today and spend some time talking about the importance of authors understanding their own goals and objectives and what their constraints are in terms of time, energy, and money, so that they can truly match their publishing path with their own goals.
Right. I mean, it sounds in a way that authors are expected to have a real entrepreneurial streak running through them as well. But I suppose on the plus side, it puts control back in their on their side of things.
That's true. Publishers, even traditional publishers, require authors to be on social media, to go out and do a lot of the marketing themselves, a lot of the publicity. And it's very much an entrepreneurial effort, even in the case of an author who has found a traditional publisher.
That's the business side of the process, but you'll be running another session at the festival that covers a pretty fundamental creative decision that a lot of first-time and maybe one-time writers face, and that's whether to tell their own story as memoir or fiction. We don't need to get into the detail of that now, we can save that for the session, but what are the consequences of getting that decision wrong?
The consequences can be substantial. For example, if an author decides to tell her story as a memoir, naming names, she can often end up angering family members, friends, guilty parties, not guilty parties, who will either be very upset with her or may threaten or take legal action. And so it's important to evaluate the importance from an author's viewpoint of telling the truth. And as we all know, the truth varies according to who the listener is, who the teller is, or whether she might want to fictionalize her memoir and still get the point across, still tell the story, but do it in a way that wouldn't necessarily incur the wrath of the parties involved.
I'm sure a lot of people are going to be signing up for these classes, but is there anything they should prepare beforehand to get the most out of their time with you?
Yes, I would suggest that any author who attends any of my sessions think hard about her or his goals. How important is it to be able to have a traditional publisher? There is a status associated with that. It's very nice to be able to say, yes, I'm a Random House author. I'm a Simon & Schuster author. However, because of the difficulty of landing a traditional deal, I would like authors to think hard about what's important to them in the end. Is it to get the story out there? Is it to make money? And I always say, if you want to make money, that's a good goal, but beware that very, very few authors do make money. Keep your day job. But I would like them to think very hard about where they would like to end up at the end of the day. What's going to be important to them when they wake up in the morning? What do they want to be proud of in terms of their publication? And that will help guide their choices and the methods by which they get to publication.
You'll also be on the panel of Literary Idol, which is where we'll be reading out the first pages of anonymized manuscripts for kind and constructive criticism from our expert panel. Everyone loves this. It's a great way to get instant feedback for your first page. But let's give the people watching some guidance. What would you want to see on the opening page of a manuscript?
On the opening page, I want to see something really gripping. You need to pull me in the first couple of paragraphs. Oftentimes, the story begins at the beginning and it kind of ramps up, and then an author will say, well, the really exciting part starts on page 57. And so my answer was, well, we know we need to bring page 57 to page 1, start it there, have a really riveting opening. Give us what I say, the who, what, where, and why should we care? We need to have the setting and understand why it's important to us right on the first page. Then you can do a flashback or flash forward and tell the story. But the first page really, really has to grab the reader. Otherwise, most people don't have the patience to go to page 2.
That's right. Great tips. So for people watching who'll be coming to the festival, you can sign up for April's sessions on the website and make sure you polish up your first page of your manuscript to impress our Literary Idol panel. April, thanks very much for joining us, and see you in Stockholm in August.
Paul, thank you very much. I very much enjoyed this and look forward to seeing you as well.